Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Tonight we have a very different show for you. It's actually going to be videotaped in 3 segments, one for each party in the House of Representatives. I have Brian Savage, who's the House Minority Whip for the Republicans. I think he goes by the title of Assistant Minority Leader. Jill Krowinski, who's the House Majority Leader for the Democrats, and Robin Chestnut-Tan-German, who's the House Majority Leader for the Progressives. We have invited these legislators here to talk about their priorities for 2017 and a little about their party platform. A platform, I don't know if many of you know this, but it entails a great deal of work. Every line is thought about, every priority, every goal that the party wants to achieve. And then the platform is voted on by all of the members of the party at their annual meeting. The House of Representatives consists of 150 legislators, each one represents 4,100 Vermonters each. There are 83 Democrats, 7 Progressives, and 53 Republicans, and 7 independents. The Democrats are the majority party, obviously, and each party holds what they call a caucus, where all the members get together to talk about what their priorities are. There's a set meeting every week at a certain time, but then caucuses are called for emergencies, to discuss a bill that's on the House floor, how they want to handle it, and they also vote on elected officials, who's going to be their leaders, assistant leaders, pretty much anything that the caucus wants to talk about. The leader title is obviously, the whip title is interesting. Wikipedia says it's the party's enforcer, but here in Vermont it's traditionally looked on as an assistant to the leader. As long as the whip really knows how everybody is going to vote on a bill, that's the primary job of the whip, so that when a bill comes to the floor there are no surprises. So our second guest today is Jill Krowinski, who's the House Majority Democratic Leader. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Ben Kidsley is going to help me ask you some questions. And I've always asked our guests, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the legislature, and what keeps you busy when you're not in the legislature.
Sure. Well, I live in Burlington in the Old North End, and nice. I was appointed to the legislature in 2012. Before that, I had played many different roles across Vermont in many different organizations. I spent a lot of time working in the community. I was a commissioner for the Fletcher Free Library.
Oh, wonderful.
And also on the board for the Montpelier Chamber Orchestra, really involved in all different types of community groups. And also I worked at Planned Parenthood of Northern New England as the Vice President of Education and Vermont Community Affairs up until December, and I just recently left.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
It always fascinates me what legislators do when they leave to go home. Some of them have other 40-hour jobs they've got to maintain, so good for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a couple of months just to get my feet underneath me at the State House, and then I'll start figuring out what I'm going to do next.
Oh, good for you.
That's awesome, yeah. So what prompted you to take on a leadership role? Because that's a lot of responsibility above and beyond just being a legislator.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a really great question. And I would say that, over the past 5-6 years now at the State House, I've always had interns from the Green Mountain Girl Scouts, and it's a tremendous program. It's great because they get to sit with you in committee and go through the meetings and the caucuses and really experience it.
Right.
And something that always frustrates me is that when I'm going around to show them the State House, there are hardly any pictures of women up. And there is this hallway that you go through in between the card room and to get to the House floor. And it's a hallway of just pictures of men. And it's so, it's hard to explain to them that they need to be able to see themselves in one of those seats. And when you see those photos, I just think they need to see women in leadership roles to inspire them to do that. And so I have been really interested in getting more involved, and I saw this as a great opportunity. So
that's great. Do you go out and talk to women and talk to them about getting involved? Because
absolutely,
we need everybody to get involved, which is really what we're trying to do here on the show.
Yeah,
that's why it's Vote for Vermont. Get out.
That's great. No, I mean it's so true. I think for young women to see, women in leadership positions, and even you doing this show, I think, is important for them to see that they can play in any of these roles. And I'm always constantly, young women and really anyone to say, get involved in your community, serve on a commission or a board, get involved. It really just makes a difference in our dialogue and community.
That's great. Good for you.
Well, and it's great. Too, this year at least, you have a new Speaker of the House. That's a woman.
Yep.
So there's another great leadership role. I know and the majority leader for the last biennium was also a woman. So it's good to see women in leadership roles.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. We're making progress, but I'll have to say one of the interesting things that I just learned is that Vermont is #1 now in the country for the number of women serving in the legislature.
Oh, really?
I just read that too.
We just got that distinction because women lost their seats or chose not to run in other states that we were competing with. And
we didn't get better. They got.
And we lost the number of women that we had. So anyway, I think it's great that we're #1, but I still think there's a larger story to tell in getting more women to run for office.
Absolutely.
That's great. Oh, we should do a show on that. Get them involved.
Yeah.
I just thought that's wonderful. I'm very excited for you. And I'm excited for Mitzi. I must say, she is going to be dynamic.
Yes.
That's a great choice.
Yeah,
So.
and Representative Mitzi Johnson has just a huge, wide experience from farming to music. She's an incredible, smart woman.
Well, the way she handled appropriations alone should qualify her for that job
Absolutely.
and any job, to tell you the truth. So we wanted to talk on this show a little bit about the priorities for your caucus and your party. Could you, I know that's tell us your priorities, but what are your priorities? What do you hope will happen this year?
Sure. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the process that we go through and how our House Democratic Caucus comes up with what our priorities are. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but every conversation at the door that we have on the campaign trail feeds into the decision-making process of what our priorities are going to be. And so we came together as a caucus in December to talk about what people heard at the doors and what they're excited to work on. And so we took 3 hours of time to wrap our hands around what people think would help their constituents back home. And there are major themes around creating a strong and healthy Vermont and grow our economy. Those are the things that bubbled up. And so what does that mean? That means policies like raising the minimum wage, policies that help grow our economy and address clean water. Clean water came up a lot. As you know, there's going to be a conversation at the legislature this year about how we fund our lake and water cleanup. And then other policies are really around access to high-quality, affordable childcare and housing. I would say those were the themes that came out of our caucus and that we're starting to take a look at this legislative session.
I'm glad to hear some specific ideas as opposed, a lot of times party platforms, and I know that that as a caucus, when you go to put together your priorities, you're kind of drawing from the party platform, and every state has a party platform unique to itself, and they usually update it once a year or every other year. I know for Vermont, they just the Democratic Party, I believe, ratified their new platform in August of 2016.
Very extensive.
Very extensive.
It's
very extensive.
9 pages long.
Yeah.
It is. We printed it out, and it's hefty.
And it's comprehensive and impressive. I would say the amount of work that goes into party platforms is incredible.
Clearly.
And that's what we were talking before. I don't think people really know that platforms exist. They hear about it, but they don't take them to heart. And I think that's where you should start with a party, is go on their website and read the platform. It's great.
Yeah, and it's another way for people to get involved in the process too. If they care a lot about an issue, to participate. It is a really open, transparent process that the party. I'm sure it's the same for all the parties. Where if you are a Democrat and you care about certain issues like affordable child care, go and make that a priority in the platform.
Right. Good job.
And how do you then take that platform that you clearly spend a lot of time and energy in developing and transmit that out to voters and constituents and
Sure.
party people who are following the Democratic Party. How do you get that message out?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting. I would actually flip the way that we think and talk about this, because when we go out and talk to Vermonters about running for office, one of the things we go to is the party platform and say, these are the things that we believe in, and these are the things that we're working on. And when people read it, they're like, that's something that I really care about, or that's something I'm inspired by,
right.
And it motivates them to get involved. So I think there's many different ways that we use the platform. I would say that if you look at the priorities out of our caucus and the Democratic platform, it's a 100% overlap. The issues that we're all talking about, from and things like the environment to economic security to diversity and access to democracy. It's all in there, and I hope that people have some time to read it.
How have you been able to take what we were all talking about and take that into a bill form? You are the majority party, so you're going to be kind of pushing the agenda, I would suggest. Mm-hmm. How do you get those priorities into bill form and get them into law?
Well, we have a really energized caucus, and I would say that, and it's important to note, we have 24 new members in the Democratic caucus, which is a little higher than what we've had in the past. And there is this energy around the policies that I've mentioned, and we have different groups of Democratic legislators working to introduce these priorities in different bills. So those are going to start coming out in the next several weeks.
Well, I certainly want to invite you and all of our guests, if you ever want to come back on and talk about any bill in particular, we'd be glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Because I think the more people really understand the bills, and a lot of times the title doesn't really get to the heart of the matter. I know some bills, it's a long story to explain, but sometimes a bill, you can't change the title. And at the end of the session, it may have nothing to do with what the title says.
It's been amended so many times.
You can't change the title. So anyway.
Yeah, so are there any bills to keep an eye out for that are coming up? I know probably there'll be lots of discussions after the new administration presents its budget in a few weeks. That'll certainly, in a lot of ways, everyone's kind of in a holding pattern, it seems, until that comes out. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we see kind of maybe what's going on with healthcare at the federal level. There's a lot of questions around that as well.
Right, yeah. Well, I think some of the bills that you're going to start seeing being introduced are around raising the minimum wage. I think you're going to see proposals around affordable child care and housing. Right. And I think you're going to see proposals to address the benefit cliff issue that we heard a lot about while knocking on doors, where Vermonters are stuck in these situations where they can't accept a raise because they would lose their child care subsidy, and that does not at all reflect the values of our communities and what we care about, and so that's something that we'll
I'm glad they're having that discussion. Good for you.
Yeah, there was a great op-ed from a woman in Barrie, I think, who is a single mom, and was receiving, I think she was receiving some benefits for child care subsidies, and was offered a position that paid more, but then those subsidies would subsequently go away. Yeah. And no one wants to be put in that situation, especially if you're especially if you're a single parent.
Right, and I just think for our businesses, if they want to be able, they want to have a really good, high quality workforce, and if the workforce doesn't have access to affordable childcare and housing, that affects business too. And so I think this is a wide conversation that affects so many different groups, and I think this is one that I hope we can come together and figure out.
Well, you mentioned before that there's a lot of overlap in platforms and stuff. Do you see any hope for reaching out with the progressives and the Republicans to come? Because we're all thinking the same thing. It's how to get there, to come up with some kind of compromise. Do you work closely with Brian Savage was just here, the other leaders of the caucuses?
Absolutely. And with the session just starting, we're beginning to have those conversations about what we all agree on we want to move forward with and how we can do that together. So I'm looking forward to working with them and working across the aisle to say, listen, we have some big challenges to face, and especially with what could be coming down from D.C. I mean, with the new administration, we could be facing a huge loss in federal funding.
Yeah.
And so
we rely on, I think we're one of the top states, percentage-wise, that relies on federal dollars more than most.
Right,
I
smaller
don't know
states tend to,
right.
yeah.
So where are we going to get the money?
More. But yeah, it's a huge concern, and I think we're all going
Absolutely.
to have to come together to figure out how to meet that challenge.
It's clearly a huge budget concern also, not just from a human rights perspective of what might happen from the federal level, but I mean a very large portion of our state budget is Medicaid dollars, and if for some reason that changes or the reimbursement rate changes, the state could be on the hook for a lot of money.
Yeah, and I would just say that there are programs that do get some sort of federal funding, or one situation that I'm very concerned about is Planned Parenthood, because one of the proposals that they're talking about saying you can't be a Medicaid provider anymore.
Right.
And so that's huge, right? That affects over 18,000 Vermonters, and so it's healthcare, it's certain providers who may be targeted. It's a huge question mark.
I'm just trying to think what would be our ability to reach out to Washington. We'll write resolutions and work with our congressional delegation, but there's very little what we can do to actually impact what happens in Washington other than just voicing our concern.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say that I think that we are starting a new chapter, and there are a lot of unknowns, but I think if we are able, for example, to fight back some of these potential cuts that we all know will all be affected by it, and we can work together, I just think if we're all together, we could be so powerful in our voice and create unlikely alliances where we might be able to maybe delay something even from happening. If we can't stop it, maybe we delay it. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us.
This may be a new turning in cooperation in the State House because of the situation where I'd like to see that myself. I think over the years we've gotten away from that, which is very sad because we're all Vermonters at heart, and we all hear the same things knocking on doors what people want. So.
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
So the real test for many issues that a party and a caucus deals with is the decision about where to invest in the state budget. And we've talked a little bit about the state budget, some of the issues there. But assuming that no new revenue is available, where would you like to see investments, or where would your caucus like to see investments in the state budget? And where would you think savings or efficiencies may be found to support those investments?
Yes, that's a great question. Well, I would have to say that, starting off with so many questions about D.C., going back to D.C., and what we could be faced with, and the investment we need to make in cleaning up our lake, I don't know if we can just say no new revenues.
Right.
And I think that it's something that we all just need to look at together. And that's why we have a very thorough committee process where policies are vetted. We hear from experts, we hear from stakeholders in the community, and we work together to find those priorities and where investments need to be made, or where we need to shift resources if that's the case. But I think we need to have a better sense of the landscape before we start putting frames around what we can or cannot do.
That's I agree with you. Yeah, there's like I said, we started talking, and there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going on federally and where and that will likely dictate a lot of the investments that are going to be made at the state level.
And the dollar amount for Lake Champlain is staggering. And it's over 5 years I think they're projecting out, or longer, to really clean it up, and that's just such a treasure for us. You've got to have a clean lake.
It affects our economy, tourism, marketing. I mean, it's vital to our
When
state.
I left the legislature in 2010, they had passed a bill, and it was going to clean up Lake Champlain. And when I left, I thought, okay, good, we're good. And then the market crashed and things went down there, and there just wasn't any money. And so many years later, it's more money and more of a problem.
Right, so, we let it slide for so long, and now it's going to take a larger investment over a longer period of time. I mean, we're looking at parts of the lake that are not going to be salvageable for 10, 15, 20 years at this point.
Who takes care of that in the State House? What committee?
We have the natural resources.
Oh, natural resources, of course.
Yeah.
Right. What committee are you on?
I'm on transportation.
Oh, excellent. Pat Brennan, good guy.
Yeah.
You'll love that committee. That's a great committee.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being on that committee. I think we've been having a lot of conversations in Burlington about how we can make our city more walkable and bike friendly, and I think it's a great conversation to bring to that committee room as we figure out some major transportation policies there.
Well, Jill, I really thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Give us a call.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's great. Thank you very much. Good luck this year.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all of my guests for appearing on the show. I want to especially thank Ben Kinsley, who's here from Campaign for Vermont. As you know, I have partnered with Campaign for Vermont to do these shows, and which will give us a great deal of visibility throughout Vermont. So we're very pleased to be working with Ben. I would encourage each of you to check out your party's platform and the other two parties as well. I guarantee you that you'll find them very interesting. I also encourage you to attend any caucus meeting. As I've mentioned before, the house is the people's house. You can go there anytime you want, listen to debates on the floor, attend committee meetings and house caucus meetings. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Have lunch in the cafeteria. Get to meet your legislators at lunch. And so that was it. I hope you enjoyed the show, give you a little insight as to what our political parties are up to this year. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.